Welcome to the world of science fiction stories, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe my channel. Enjoy the listening. Hyperspace breakthrough. Humans outsmart aliens with ancient nautical secrets. The Galactic Academy stood as the pinnacle of higher learning in the known universe. Its grand halls, carved from the very rock of a drifting asteroid, housed the brightest minds from across the stars. Only the most gifted students were admitted, and even among them, few ever graduated with honors. The Academy prided itself on its rigorous curriculum, pushing the boundaries of what was thought possible. Among its many courses, none was as feared as the hyperspatial navigation test. It was the final challenge for those who wished to be recognized as elite navigators, masters of plotting safe passages through the chaos of the cosmos. Ryan McAllister had always known that humanity was the underdog in the Academy. The humans were a relatively new addition to the galactic community, their technology primitive compared to the centuries-old advancements of other species. Many viewed them as little more than a curiosity, hardy survivors from a dangerous world, but hardly intellectual equals to the likes of the Zoran, the Valeri, or the calculating minds of the Veras, he thought. Ryan had spent years proving otherwise. On the day of the test, he walked into the examination chamber with the same quiet confidence he carried into every challenge. The room was vast, the ceiling an open projection of the galaxy itself, glowing in shades of blue and violet. He took his place among the alien students, all of whom had spent months preparing for this moment. Some had undergone specialized mental training to increase their cognitive processing power. Others had designed custom-built neural interfaces to accelerate their calculations. A deep, resonant voice filled the room as the head examiner, a towering Zorian with crystalline skin, began to speak. The challenge before you is not for the weak. You must plot a route through the Alna star cluster, a region dense with gravitational anomalies, rogue pulsars, and shifting wormhole currents. Any miscalculation will result in catastrophic failure. You have 72 hours. A series of glowing terminals rose from the floor before each student, displaying a complex simulation of the star cluster. Mathematical variables scrolled across the screen, detailing every known hazard. The alien students immediately began their work, fingers flying across holographic interfaces as they ran complex trajectory simulations. Ryan simply leaned back in his chair, staring up at the holographic stars above him. A few students stole glances at him, whispering in their native tongues. Some sneered, convinced he was already overwhelmed. Others dismissed him entirely, believing he was a fool for wasting time. Ryan ignored them. He traced the patterns of the stars with his eyes, watching the faintest variations in their brightness, the subtle movements of celestial bodies that most others had long since stopped noticing. He exhaled slowly, pulling a small leather-bound notebook from the pocket of his uniform. It was old, its pages filled with handwritten notes and rough sketches. It had been passed down in his family for generations, filled with lessons taught by sailors and explorers from a time when humanity had yet to leave its own planet. Ryan flipped through its worn pages, scanning the diagrams of constellations, ancient methods of navigation that predated even the first telescopes back on Earth. Long before humanity had access to digital maps or satellite guidance, they had relied on the stars alone to find their way. Polynesian voyagers had crossed vast oceans without compasses, guided only by the night sky and the movement of the waves. Desert nomads had used the tilt of constellations to chart their paths across endless sands. Even in the most advanced human warships, backup navigation training still included reading the stars, just in case technology failed. Ryan tapped a sequence of controls on his terminal, bringing up a different set of data from the one the Academy provided. He didn't need the algorithm-generated hazard maps or pre-approved flight paths. He needed only the raw star positions, displayed exactly as they were, without equations or prediction clouding his judgment. At the front of the room, the head examiner observed in silence, his crystalline form refracting the dim light of the simulation chamber. His expression was unreadable, but he noticed what the others did not. Ryan was not merely looking at numbers. He was seeing patterns, relationships, and unspoken language written in the vastness of space. The hours passed, and the tension in the room thickened. The alien students, consumed by their calculations, were beginning to show signs of strain. Some grew frustrated as their models failed to predict the cluster's shifting gravity wells. Others cursed as their projections sent them spiraling into neutron star fields, their ships reduced to atoms in the simulations. Ryan remained still, flipping through his notebook, sketching rough angles and distances. His mind was free of distractions, focused only on what the universe itself was telling him. He marked a few key pulsars, stable beacons that could be used as reference points. He noted the orbits of rogue planets, the way their gravity subtly altered the drift of nearby stellar debris. He wasn't solving an equation, he was reading the rhythm of the cosmos itself. By the time the first day ended, several students had already dropped out, their simulations failing beyond recovery. Others remained locked in desperate calculations, adjusting their models over and over again. Ryan, however, had already written his final notes. He stretched, yawning slightly, then shut his notebook and leaned back in his chair, closing his eyes. Murmurs spread across the room. He was finished already? The disbelief was palpable. Even the head examiner's crystalline eyes flickered with interest. No student in the history of the exam had ever claimed to be done within the first day. Yet Ryan sat there, arms folded behind his head, exuding the calm of someone who had already seen the answer long before the question was even asked. The students who had mocked him earlier exchanged nervous glances. The professors whispered among themselves. And as Ryan sat there, relaxed in his chair, he couldn't help but smirk. He had plotted his course the moment he walked into the room. Now all he had to do was wait. Ryan sat in the examination hall, his arms crossed as he observed the restless activity around him. The alien students, still deep in their calculations, barely noticed his stillness at first, but as time passed and whispers spread, more and more eyes flickered in his direction. Their glances filled with doubt, annoyance, and in some cases, growing curiosity. The test was far from over, yet he had stopped working entirely. It unsettled them. One of the Valeri students, a towering figure with elongated limbs and skin covered in thin iridescent scales, finally spoke aloud. "Are you giving up, human?" His voice was sharp, carrying a hint of mockery. Others around him paused, listening. Ryan didn't bother opening his eyes. "I'm done," he said simply. The Valeri scoffed, shaking his head. "Impossible. This test takes days, even for the brightest minds in the academy. You cannot have solved it already." Ryan opened one eye, looking at him lazily. "Then I guess I must have made a mistake." His tone was light, almost amused. He knew it would infuriate them further. Another student, this time a Zoran, tapped the holographic display of his own terminal in frustration. "If you truly finished, then let the examiners review your work. If it's incorrect, you fail." His crystalline eyes narrowed as he studied Ryan. "Or perhaps you're afraid to be proven wrong." Ryan let out a small sigh and sat up, stretching his arms as though waking from a nap. He had no interest in entertaining their challenges, but he was growing impatient. The examiners had been watching him since the moment he put his pen down, yet they hadn't approached him. He knew they were deliberating, likely trying to decide if his early completion was even worth acknowledging. A soft chime echoed through the room, followed by a mechanical voice. "Cadet McAllister, report to the head examiner station." Ryan stood without hesitation, his expression unreadable as he strode past the rows of terminals where students remained hunched over their work. The quiet hum of computations filled the air, the soft tapping of controls mixing with the occasional muttered curse as another student encountered an unexpected error. He could feel their eyes on him as he walked, the weight of their skepticism pressing against his back. The head examiner, a tall Zoran with shimmering facets along his translucent form, regarded Ryan with a gaze that was difficult to decipher. Beside him, two other examiners, one from the insectoid saurid race and another from the telepathic Vas, studied Ryan with equal intensity. His completed exam hovered above the table between them, a three-dimensional map of the Ilnath star cluster rotating in slow motion. Every plotted trajectory, every calculated shift and gravitational pull was displayed in full detail. "Cadet McAllister," the head examiner finally said, his voice like the gentle chime of vibrating glass, "you claim to have finished the test within a single day. Explain your methodology." Ryan shrugged slightly. I read the stars, he said simply. The sorried examiner, her mandibles clicking in irritation, shifted in place. Clarify, she demanded. What data models did you use? Which computational sequences did you run? We see no evidence of standard academy protocols applied to your solution. Ryan exhaled through his nose. He had expected this reaction. It didn't matter that his route was flawless. They weren't just questioning his accuracy, they were questioning the very legitimacy of his approach. He placed a hand on the holographic display, rotating the cluster so that the view shifted to a particular formation of pulsars. Your models are designed to predict gravitational anomalies before they happen, he said, keeping his voice calm but firm. But that means you're constantly chasing shifting data. Pulsars, however, are stable. They're the most consistent points of reference in the galaxy. Instead of running simulations based on change, I used constants. The vast examiner, his smooth, grayish skin barely shifting as he spoke, tilted his head. You disregarded all hazard predictions. How did you compensate for unforeseen anomalies? Ryan tapped a specific star cluster on the projection. I didn't disregard them. I used natural markers instead of equations. The way light bends around a gravitational field tells me everything I need to know. Your models adjust based on calculations. I adjust based on observation. The head examiner studied him in silence, his crystalline fingers tapping against the edge of the console. Ryan could tell he was analyzing every word, cross-referencing his explanation with thousands of years of recorded navigational history. Finally, the examiner spoke. Your course is not only correct, he said slowly, his voice carrying a note of something unreadable, but it is more efficient than any solution ever recorded for this test. A ripple of disbelief spread through the room. Even the students who had not been paying attention now looked up, eyes wide with shock. The murmurs grew louder, some speaking in disbelief, others in outright denial. The Valeri who had mocked Ryan earlier stood abruptly. That is absurd. He must have had prior knowledge of the test. There is no way he could have outperformed every previous cadet using such primitive methods. The sorried examiner raised a clawed hand, silencing the growing noise, her multifaceted eyes locked onto Ryan. We will review your methods further, she said. For now, return to your station and do not discuss this matter with others. Ryan gave a casual salute and turned away, making his way back to his seat. As he sat down, he caught the glares of several alien students. He had disrupted their entire perception of the test, of what was possible. He didn't care. He had made his point. Now it was only a matter of time before the academy decided what to do with it. Ryan sat at his station, his fingers lightly tapping against the smooth surface of his inactive terminal. The murmurs in the examination hall hadn't stopped since the announcement of his results. Even though the exam was still ongoing for the other students, most had lost focus. Their attention split between their own struggles and the unsettling reality that a human had outperformed them all. He could feel the glares, the quiet hostility building in those who had spent their entire academic lives believing in the superiority of their methods. The Valeri who had challenged him earlier hadn't returned to his seat. Instead, he stood at the edge of the examination chamber, speaking in low, hurried tones to another species. Others were whispering in their own languages, no doubt speculating about how Ryan had managed such an outcome. Ryan knew what would come next. It wasn't enough for them to hear that he had found the best solution. They needed to discredit it. That was how the academy worked. Advancements were only accepted if they fit within the established framework. A student who had broken conventions so drastically, especially a human, would never be allowed to upend their centuries-old understanding of navigation without resistance. The head examiner had left his station, likely retreating to the faculty chambers to review Ryan's method in greater detail. The other examiners had followed, but their absence had done nothing to calm the growing unease in the room. If anything, it had made things worse. Without the presence of authority figures, students were emboldened to speak more openly. The Zelon beside Ryan, a student with translucent skin that pulsed faintly with shifting light, finally turned to face him. His expression was unreadable, but his voice carried a forced neutrality that failed to mask his skepticism. You must have had some kind of advantage. Did a professor feed you the correct route before the exam? Ryan exhaled through his nose, amused by how quickly the accusations were forming. If someone had given me the answer, I would have failed. The whole point of the test is that the routes shift based on real-time gravitational readings. He stretched his arms, his muscles sore from the long hours of sitting. You've all spent so much time trusting your simulations that you forgot how to actually see what's in front of you. The Zelon's eyes darkened, his luminous patterns dimming slightly. Your arrogance will be short-lived, he said, his voice clipped. When the examiners find an error in your calculations, your result will be nullified. Ryan leaned back, crossing his arms. Good thing I didn't make any errors then. Before the Zorian could respond, the main doors to the hall slid open with a quiet hiss. A wave of silence swept through the room as the head examiner returned, his crystalline body refracting the artificial light above him. The other examiners followed, their expressions carefully neutral. Ryan studied them, noting the subtle tension in their movements. They had made a decision. The head examiner stopped in the center of the hall, his gaze sweeping across the assembled students before settling on Ryan. "Cadet McAllister," he called. Ryan stood without hesitation, stepping forward as every eye in the room focused on him. He could feel the weight of their expectations, the unspoken hope that his success would be overturned. The head examiner's voice was steady, but there was something almost reluctant in the way he spoke. Your solution has been reviewed extensively. We have verified every calculation, every projected course correction, and every gravitational offset. He paused, his crystalline fingers twitching at his sides. Your route is flawless. A sharp collective intake of breath filled the chamber. A few students outright gasped. Others sat in stunned silence, their disbelief heavy in the air. The Valari, who had been whispering in the corner, clenched his fists, his tail twitching in barely concealed anger. The Sarther examiner stepped forward, her multifaceted eyes reflecting the glow of the holographic display beside her. The Academy has never encountered a navigational approach such as yours, she said, her voice carrying an edge of curiosity beneath its usual formality. You did not rely on standard predictive algorithms, nor did you employ quantum computation models. Your method was archaic, yet undeniably effective. Ryan kept his expression neutral. He knew what she was leading toward. They had no choice but to acknowledge his success, but that didn't mean they were ready to accept it. The vast examiner, his smooth gray skin barely shifted as he moved, regarded Ryan with a critical gaze. Your technique is incompatible with the Academy's current curriculum. If we were to accept it, we would need to restructure our entire navigational framework. His voice was careful, calculated. That would take years. Ryan tilted his head slightly. So what are you saying? The head examiner exhaled, the sound resonating like a faint chime. Your solution is unorthodox. While we cannot dispute its accuracy, we also cannot implement a methodology that disregards centuries of established knowledge. It is the ruling of this council that your results will stand, but your technique will not be officially recognized as an alternative to existing navigational models. The silence that followed was suffocating. Ryan took a slow breath, absorbing their words. They were acknowledging his victory, but they were stripping it of any real consequence. His name would not go down as a pioneer of navigation. His work would not change how the Academy taught its students. He had proven them wrong, but they had found a way to make sure it wouldn't matter. He let out a quiet laugh, shaking his head. So that's how it is, huh? The head examiner's crystalline form pulsed faintly. You may keep your score, but this discussion is concluded. Ryan's smirk faded. He looked past the examiners, past the students who had spent the last few hours doubting him, and saw the same thing in every expression. Fear. Not fear of him, but fear of what his success represented. They weren't rejecting his method because it was flawed. They were rejecting it because it threatened everything they believed to be true. He met the head examiner's gaze, his expression hardening. You can ignore it now, he said, his voice quiet but steady, but you won't be able to ignore it forever. The sorried examiner's mandibles clicked softly. We shall see. The head examiner inclined his head slightly. You are dismissed, Cadet McAllister. Ryan turned on his heel, walking back to his station as the whispers resumed, louder than before. He knew that this wasn't over. They could bury his method for now, pretend it didn't exist, but knowledge had a way of spreading, and once an idea took root, it was only a matter of time before it grew into something they couldn't ignore. He had won the battle. The war was just beginning. Ryan left the examination hall without looking back. The air outside felt heavier than usual, not from the artificial gravity of the station, but from the weight of what had just transpired. He had won, and yet the victory was hollow. His method was accurate, superior even, yet the Academy had refused to acknowledge it as a valid approach. They had chosen to uphold tradition over progress. He walked through the winding corridors of the Academy, passing by towering windows that overlooked the distant glow of a binary star system. The station drifted in the void, suspended in the delicate balance between the gravitational poles of two dying suns. It was a breathtaking sight, one that had captivated Ryan when he first arrived. Now it felt distant, like everything else in this place. The murmurs of passing students followed him wherever he went. Some whispered in hushed voices, exchanging glances before quickly averting their eyes. Others watched him openly, their expressions ranging from curiosity to outright hostility. He knew what they were thinking. To them, he had broken an unspoken rule. He had proven that a human, someone from a so-called primitive species, could outthink the most advanced navigational minds in the galaxy, and that was a threat the Academy was not willing to face. As he turned a corner, a sharp voice called out behind him, "McAllister." He recognized the voice before he even turned around. The Valeri student who had challenged him earlier stood with his arms crossed, his serpentine tail flicking in irritation. His dark green scales shimmered under the artificial lighting, his narrowed golden eyes fixed on Ryan with open contempt. "You think this is over?" The Valeri's voice was low, controlled, but laced with restrained fury. Ryan met his gaze, his own expression unreadable. "I don't think anything," he said evenly. "I just know that I finished the test and the examiners verified my results." The Valeri stepped closer, his presence imposing, but Ryan held his ground. "You embarrassed all of us," he hissed. "You think this will be forgotten, that you can just walk away after making a mockery of the Academy?" Ryan exhaled slowly. He had no interest in arguing with someone who refused to see the truth. "If I embarrassed you, that's on you," he said. "All I did was find the right answer." The Valeri's jaw tightened, his hands clenching into fists. For a moment, Ryan thought he might lash out, but instead he let out a sharp breath and took a step back. "This isn't over," he said. "You may have fooled the examiners, but some of us aren't so easily convinced. Sooner or later, you'll have to prove yourself again, and when that time comes, you won't get so lucky." Ryan smirked slightly, though there was no real amusement behind it. "Luck had nothing to do with it," he said. The Valeri glared at him for another long moment before turning sharply and walking away. Ryan watched him go, then shook his head. He had expected resistance, but he hadn't expected this level of resentment. The Academy had always prided itself on intellectual progress, yet when faced with something they couldn't explain through their established methods, they rejected it outright.